Wong everini kinyokin kikusiake maninki.
Good morning, everyone watching us. Good afternoon, good day, wherever you are. Welcome to the episode 1 podcast of how AI is influencing the world and why AI projects are failing. Today, I have a senior colleague, Scott Archibald, an executive transformational strategist with deep experience helping organizations navigate large-scale business and technology change. Scott previously worked with Gartner and has spent years advising leaders on transformational strategy, operational alignment, and how organizations can move from vision to execution successfully. What I appreciate more about Scott's perspective is that he looks AI beyond the hype, focusing on leadership readiness, realistic implementation, and how companies can accelerate decisions without creating costly mistakes. So I'm excited for this conversation because we are going to unpack why so many AI initiatives are struggling right now and what leaders should actually do differently. Thank you very much for joining me, Scott.
Thanks for the intro, Eric. That was great. I want to meet this person. I was listening to you talk everything about what I'm doing or what I've done. I'm like, wow. I think you're right. This is an exciting topic. Obviously, it's one that's getting a lot of press, and I'm really looking forward to the whole series we're going to do on this. I think that we'll start today and see where this goes based on questions and input we get, but exciting stuff. And I appreciate your hands-on experience that you have. I think we're kind of coming at this from a couple of different angles, me from the leadership and you from the hands-on experience. And it's pretty powerful stuff. We've had some great conversations already. So
yes, thank you very much, Scott. So the topic today is why AI projects are failing and what leaders are missing. So since AI is moving incredibly fast right now, and almost every organization feels pressure to adopt it in some way, but at the same time, we're also seeing a lot of projects struggle or quietly fail. Why?
And it's funny because you and I have talked about this. I've talked about it with other people. You see it. It's AI's projects aren't failing because of technology. This is a classic, I don't even want to call it an IT problem. It's kind of a classic business problem. We've seen this. If you go back in all the different technology inflections that have happened just in the last, say, just this last 20, 30 years, you look at client server, you look at ERP, you look at cloud, everybody wants to focus on the technology. It's really, you have to focus on the people, the process, and the technology. And I think what's interesting with AI is AI has been around for a long time. Now it's evolving very quickly. It's changing very quickly. There are some major changes, obviously, in the last couple of years with generative AI. But AI as a practice, companies using it, especially with machine learning, agent technology, that's been around for a long time. And so it's really interesting to see why people are failing so much with AI today and their current implementations that they're trying.
So Scott mentioned it's not about the technology. I think sometimes leadership expectation, readiness, and culture, and even the underlying business processes are actually the issues behind all these failures that we're experiencing. What do you think about it?
I think a lot of organizations are trying to move really fast here, right? And that's the pace of business has increased over the years. So I get that. And I think everybody understands that. But I think you have to understand as an organization, as a business, as you go into an AI project, you really have to understand where you're at as a business. So what's your readiness to do an AI project? Where are the people at? Where's your process at? Where's your data at? What do you already know about AI? What have you been doing with AI in the past? All those things kind of factor in. We'll get into this more in the next few minutes, but I think those are things that people are forgetting about. They're kind of forgetting the playbook that we've seen in the past, what works and what doesn't work. And we're falling into that trap of it's just the technology. Let's just go implement technology. Obviously, it doesn't work, right?
And they're just getting into implementation without clarity and readiness, as you mentioned earlier on. So that kind of creates, that pressure creates unrealistic return of investment expectation, especially very early on, without actually understanding the full circle of what it comes with.
And I think this pace of business, those unrealistic expectations, the leadership team, the executive team, they want to see the payback right away, right? And so that's also pushing people to do things faster. But I think when you're looking for a payback, but you're not even sure what problem you're solving or what your strategic intent is, then you're going to have problems, obviously, down the road, right? So it's kind of what I'm seeing a lot of organizations do right now is it's almost like they see their competitor running a marathon and they're thinking, hey, I haven't run in 5 years, but I'm going to get up off the couch and go run a marathon right now and beat that person. We all know that's not going to work. So there's kind of keeping that analogy, if you will, this kind of crawl run approach. And I think there's a lot of organizations that should be crawling that are trying to run right now. And that's part why we're seeing some of the failures out there.
Do you think the organization rushing are doing that because they are afraid of falling behind?
Oh, definitely. I think there's kind of this herd mentality almost, right? The hype is so strong around AI. You go back to cloud when cloud first came out. What did everybody say they were going to do with cloud? I'm going to implement cloud to save money. And nobody saved any money, right? Yeah. It was what cloud did. Cloud allowed you to operate differently, not really save money. And I think we're going to see the same thing with AI in a whole different way. There's opportunities. There's a lot of talk in the press about, oh, there's layoffs because of AI. I don't think AI is going to really replace jobs, so to speak. Sure, maybe some that are very process-oriented, very tactical. But I think you have to have the human side of it, and AI assists that, right? So at least where we are right now. But I do think there's this, I don't want to fall behind. And that's causing businesses and leaders to rush to implementation without really understanding what's the strategic differentiator that they're looking for with AI. Why is AI so important to your business, and how's it going to change your business down the road? What would you want to do with that? I think people are really looking for, how do I do something, cost savings, how do I do something at scale? And I think that's, to your point, all because everybody else is doing something, right?
I think they're not trying to ask the right questions. They're letting themselves being controlled by the hype, which leads to poor decisions. And do you also think they underestimate the complexity of AI? Do you think executives are underestimating that?
Definitely. Like the first thing that we're seeing, if you were to go in and do an AI readiness assessment with a company, you have to talk about AI literacy and really making sure that the executives and the whole team understand what's possible with AI today. And a lot is possible, but only if you're ready for it, right? So really understanding and getting the executive team to be somewhat literate about AI. And we're not talking like, hey, they're going to go out and tear servers apart and start coding. This is more around, what does it take to be successful with AI? What are the building blocks that I need? How do I speak intelligently about what and what isn't possible for their organization, and what speed can they implement at? And I think those things can really help set the tone for successful implementations or at least pilots.
Yeah, talking about literacy, I don't think literacy has to do more with the technical side. You must not become an engineer, but just understanding the capabilities, limitations, risk, and informations that come with.
I think it's interesting. One of the biggest things that people are missing when they think about AI and readiness is, what state is your data in, right? If you're going to try and do things with AI and it's going to use data that you already have or that you have access to, what's the integrity of that data? What's the governance process that you're using to update that? All those things come into play. These are things that the executive team probably hasn't even thought about most of this in more than a decade, or maybe at all, right? They just assume that their data is in really good shape. And what we see is most companies are still dealing with, how do they do data integrity and how do they manage their data as a corporate asset? That's something that has been going on for the last decade. Some companies are even just starting off on that right now, right? So if you don't have that foundation, I'm sure you've seen, if you don't know what your data is, how the heck are you going to do AI on top of that, right? So
I'm talking about data integrity, data bias. Those are issues that existed right before AI. So AI will just come and amplify that. So if teams are expected to execute something, leadership itself doesn't fully understand that, then the whole process will be screwed. That's why it is very important and imperative for leadership to understand.
What are you seeing? What are you seeing with the vendors and how they're contributing to some of the confusion out there? Like, what do you hear from the teams that you're working with right now on that one?
Yeah, I think they're kind of confused, carried away by the hype, especially the hype. They are rushing, trying to not be left behind, and we have to help them take it one step at a time, make them understand it's just another industrial revolution. Don't feel like you'll be left behind. Just keep your objectives the same and make sure you attain your objectives, but just use AI it will just help you get there faster, but don't be in a rush. It helps you get there faster, but you still don't have to be in a rush because it's going to magnify your errors, magnify your mistakes, magnify your losses, and it can magnify your profits too if you get it right.
And I think it's interesting when you think about where the vendors are going with AI, and not even just like Chat and Gemini and all the different platforms they have out there, but even what you would think of as a non-AI vendor and how they're implementing AI into their products. I almost feel like we're swinging back to the monolithic software days. So moving away from kind of an open platform to more of a, hey, buy my suite of products because it will all work together. And I think that's something that, I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's something that we'll see evolve over the next 5 to 10 years, probably more towards an open platform, but who knows, time will tell on that. I think that's something that is going to have impact to this as well.
Definitely. And there's a huge point that you made earlier on, because organizations who think AI is going to fix their broken automatically, those are the ones I think are really rushing into it without really understanding maintaining their objectives and understanding how the AI transition can influence that. It goes both ways. It can fix the broken workflows, but not automatically. You still have to get it right. And it's not a lot about the technical side. Like it's about your capabilities and your critical thinking skills. That's why it's very important for leadership to understand and stay on point on what they want to achieve out of their project.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of people are successful in some of these pilots with AI when they apply it to a task. But when they try and apply it to a process, things start to break down. Yeah. I think a lot of people will give AI a bad name on that. They say, oh, well, it's not ready for process-oriented things. Actually, it's your process was broken. Your process wasn't ready for AI, not that AI wasn't ready for your process, right? And so, again, just some of the classic things are coming back from what we've seen in the past, garbage out, right? So if my process is broken and I try and put AI on top of it to get efficiencies, well, guess what? It's not going to work. And so I think there's a lot of process, operational discipline, things like that are really needed. Or at least you need to understand the state that you're at as a company, as an organization, before you try and layer AI on top of that.
Because AI is not a replacement for operational discipline. And you mentioned earlier on AI readiness evaluation. I think that's something that a lot of organizations need to work on before actually getting into AI, because building AI on top of unstable foundations is what is getting derailed by the hype and everything. So I think AI readiness is what organizations should start on.
And I think AI readiness, people probably have some vision of, wow, a consulting group's going to come in and spend a few months with me on AI readiness. I don't know if I have that kind of time. I don't think that's what it needs to be. I think you can actually do AI readiness when you have the right layer of people. So it's not probably your executive team, but it's not the front line. It's probably your senior managers and maybe mid-layer. But basically, this is like, you can do a really quick one in a few hours. You can do a more complete one in half a day. But it's really just understanding where am I at from a people, process, technology. How willing are my people ready to use AI? What's the organizational change? What's the change management? What's the culture like? Looking at the process pieces as well. And then where are you with the technology? So we say AI readiness, and I think people think, oh, that's probably millions of dollars and months that it takes. It doesn't have to be at all. And if somebody's telling you it does, you ought to come talk to us, because it doesn't have to be that way. So
definitely. So do you think, talking about readiness, how do you think companies underestimate the importance of process maturity?
I think they are. I don't think companies understand where they're at from a process maturity standpoint when it starts to go across organizational boundaries. So what I think the mistake that people are making is you might have an executive who says, hey, process maturity, we're in really good shape, because that's the sales leader, for example, thinking about sales and how the sales process is. But all the other processes that might feed into that or come out of that may not be in as good of shape. And so I think That's something that AI will start to expose, is where you have process issues and you try and layer on AI on top of that. You might find that in some places within an organization, process is working really well.
Right.
But as it connects to other places in different organizations in that company, or even with your vendors, your partners, your clients, maybe it's not as good as you thought. So I think that is a big deal.
And that they start having disruptions, and that's exactly where the readiness assessment becomes important. So
I think the other thing too is I see a lot of organizations who are looking inward on AI. How can it make me more efficient? How can it help me scale? How can it cut costs? Some of the really normal operational things that you would look inward for. I only see a few companies in each industry, if you will, or in each segment that are really looking at it from a, how do I help my clients with it? How do I provide better client service or better client access? There's really not a lot going on with that we see. It's kind of, I think it's more inwardly focused. And I mentioned earlier, strategic intention. What is your strategic intention with AI? How do you want to use AI to differentiate you from the competitors? I think that's something that we're not seeing either. I don't think people are at that level of maturity. But that's kind of, in a way, if you don't understand your strategic intent, how do you know what tactics to use? So it's interesting, and I think this gets back to the hype piece that you mentioned earlier. I do think people are in this big rush. There is this big hype. There is this big, I don't want to fall behind. So let's do something. Was kind of the notion right now.
So what does a realistic AI roadmap look like to you?
That's a good question. I think the first thing would be do the AI readiness assessment, look at literacy, where are you at with that? Doesn't have to take a long time. You can get that done in a couple of weeks, really, depending on schedules that you need to get in front of people. The readiness assessment, I think that's a half-day thing with the right leadership. And then I think once you have that, you can start understanding strategically, what do I want to do with AI? How does this fit into my business process? And start looking at some pilots. I think some pilots are getting drawn out too long. They're costing too much. They're failing. What was the failure rate we saw the other day? 85% of projects are failing. They're costing 4 times as much when they go into production. These pilots should be really small, learn fast, fail fast. If you're going to fail fast, understand why, recover from it. And that should be, I think you want to build up your AI muscle in the organization. So start small. Again, you're not going to get off the couch and run the marathon tomorrow, right? So you get off the couch and maybe you're going to run around the block. You got to kind of take that same mentality with AI, I think, and how you move forward.
So can you shed more light on cross-functional alignment and how it can help with AI implementation too?
Yeah. So I think the one thing about if you think about cross-function implementations, which AI is probably always going to be cross-functional, right? There's always going to be something that feeds in and out of that process, that organization. That can be a hard one to do when you're inside the organization, because it starts looking like turf wars. Oh, well, I don't want to change my process. You change your process. Mine's not broken. Yours is broken. You bring somebody in from the outside, and then it's all pretty objective. Well, these people said, here's what we need to do, right? And everybody bands together and does it. So I think you do want to get, especially when you get into some of this functional, cross-organizational work, I do think you want to bring in somebody that can be viewed as objective versus trying to do it internally, because I think you'll really get slowed down from an internal perspective if you're trying to do it on your own, because you wind up a lot of finger pointing, a lot of misunderstanding. I think there's a real bias there if you try and go internally. So externally, getting some help there can really be useful.
Thank you very much, Scott. Do you think there's any last word for our viewers or our experts or companies, organizations watching us right now?
I think all organizations are thinking about AI, right? And how do they approach it? I would have realistic expectations. I would look at some of the things we've talked about. What do you understand about AI? Where do you think your business is at from a readiness standpoint? You're going to start small, hopefully. You crawl, walk, run. So most everybody's going to start out crawling. I don't think I've seen anybody, unless you've been dealing with AI for the last decade and really using it in your business in different ways than what we've seen in the last couple of years. Nobody's starting off walking, right? Everybody's crawling when they start. So keep that in mind. Be realistic about this. And also think about strategically, what would you want to do with AI? Because that will help set the direction for pilots and different things that you want to do in the short term. What are you seeing on this one?
Yeah, I think if there's one thing leaders should take away, is that a successful AI transformation is much more about alignment, readiness, and decision making than the hype, like you mentioned. So because rushing into it without clarity will just create expensive mistakes that will cost more to the organization.
Yeah.
So instead of accelerating decisions and avoiding costly mistakes, they should try to take their time to navigate the space.
Because I think you may want to move fast. I mentioned business is moving faster these days. Everybody wants to move fast. But I think moving fast without clarity, you are going to have mistakes. You are going to have unexpected costs. It's going to get expensive. This is one of these things where I think it's better to understand, where are you at? What do you want to do? What are the capabilities? Try some things out. And I think people who do this will see is they might feel like they're behind at first, but what will happen is they will leapfrog their competitors because they will do all the building blocks correctly, and then they will really be able to use it in a productive way, while their competitors who maybe got out of the gate really fast and did some things find that none of it works and they have to go back to basically square zero, right? Square one. Yeah. And so I think, and that can be a pattern that we've seen people repeat time and time again. They don't just do it once, they actually start making the same mistakes again and then have to go back to square one again, right? So if you stay in that loop long enough, your competitors are just going to bypass you because they'll take their time, do all the right things. And this is a marathon, it's not a sprint.
So before we conclude, I'll let you give out your contact details and how organizations or companies can reach out to you for consultancy or maybe help with AI implementation or AI readiness.
Sure. So pretty simple. You can email me if you want, ScottArchibald316@gmail. I have a website. It's just my name, ScottDArchibald.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn. There's different places you can find me out there. So pretty simple. Or we'll probably just, maybe at the end we can throw up contact info or
Absolutely. I will.
The podcast. So what about you?
You can find me on LinkedIn too, Eric Bannavti Suiseka, or you can email me, ericbannavti@gmail.com. So I think I have something too. I have 2 books on Amazon, How to Stay in Control in the Artificial Intelligence Era. You can get it there and keep increasing your AI literacy. Then I have another one on digital literacy, facts, filters, and traps, navigating social media in the age of alternative truth. Talking about the hype, the AI hype is coming mostly from social media. So that's why digital literacy and AI literacy go hand in hand to help you cut off the noise and see through what is necessary for your organizations. So that's
good stuff. I got to catch up with you on book writing. So we'll have a library soon.
Really. Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
This is our first episode on why AI projects are failing and what organizations can do to catch up and make sure they are ready for AI implementation and avoid costly mistakes. So thank you very much, Scott, for joining me. Stay tuned and watch out for our next episode. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Wong every nick in yokin kikus yake manin ki. Gloria.